Welcome back. You're still watching Network Africa on Channels Television. Now, the crisis in Burundi continues with about 6 prominent deaths recorded in the past 2 weeks. The African Union is worried that the crisis risks spiraling into what they call a catastrophe, both for the country and the wider region. The latest murder of Colonel Jean Bikomagu, a former chief of staff, outside of his home in Bujumbura on Saturday by unidentified gunmen, most likely prompted the statement by the AU. President Nkurunziza was declared winner of elections held in July for a third term that both opponents and Western powers say violated the constitution and provisions of the Arusha peace deal, which ended a 1993 to 2005 civil war between the Hutu majority and Tutsi minority. Now, the African Union, as we told you, is concerned about what's happening in Burundi. But let's just take you through what the international community has been doing even before President Nkurunziza declared his desire to run for a third term as president. You will recall that the United States did want President Nkurunziza to desist from running for a third term. And after that, there were travel warnings that were issued to Burundi. Following that, the elections were not monitored by the international community. The results were also seen as not credible. They were equally deemed not to have been free or fair. The United Nations and the African Union have urged Burundi to shun the violence since the outcome of the just concluded presidential elections in which President Nkurunziza was declared winner. Well, we're joined by African news analyst Mr. Warwick Onyema. He has been monitoring the happenings in Burundi over time, and he joins us from London. Mr. Onyema, thank you very much for your time on the program again.
Thank you, Cynthia.
It's a pleasure. Now, what are your thoughts on the timing of the African Union in voicing its concerns about Burundi?
I think because the Union recognizes that this is the familiar set of events that eventually results in the whole country collapsing into warfare. This has happened before. Tit-for-tat killings, murders of prominent citizens, leading to divisions within the armed forces, and in effect, civil war or generalized breakdown of law and order. I think that's the East African community has seen all this happening in Burundi on a number of occasions before. And I think what concerns them is that this is exactly the path that led to previous conflicts.
Now, seeing as this is basically history repeating itself, to put it in that way, do you reckon that these statements made by the United Nations, for instance, over the weekend, and the AU today, do you think it will make any difference whatsoever in this crisis?
I don't think they will. I think the time for making statements is past. I don't think anybody any of the contending parties in Burundi is paying the slightest attention to what's being said outside. They are setting themselves up for what is for Burundi a familiar pattern of internecine conflict. And I don't think speeches and plaudits and cliches from abroad is going to make any difference.
That's just what you just said is leading to my next question. I'm asking now, what should the international community be channeling more efforts into besides voicing concerns and condemning killings?
This is a more difficult one. I would be inclined to say, what have they done before in outbreaks of major ethnic slaughter that takes place in Burundi on depressingly repetitive frequency? What did they do before? How did they intervene effectively? Because basically, if whatever they did before to stop this pattern is what they're going to have to do now, but more proactively than before. Otherwise, you're going to get this has been Burundi's history from independence.
So are we likely to see any intervention, maybe, from the East Africa region or the Africa Union or the United Nations? What do you reckon?
It's something I think that would have to be led not by the African Union, which I regard as a toothless bulldog, all a flair and no substance. It is something that I think the United Nations will have to coordinate and instigate. They can't leave it to the African Union. I mean, all that the African Union is going to do is utter platitudes and cliches, and I don't see them doing more than that. No, the United Nations will have to take the initiative, if it's possible, and put in an intervention force to try and keep the two contending sides apart.
Now, in truth, we've seen about 5 or 6 killings, prominent killings based on both sides of this, both that are pro-Nkurunziza and anti-Nkurunziza in the past 2 weeks. What do you anticipate will play out in days to come in Burundi?
Well, if you look at the killings, they have been, I've called them tit-for-tat killings, but they're a little bit more worrying than that. They're dividing along ethnic lines. A Hutu general gets killed. So a Tutsi former chief of staff is killed in reprisal. And you're going to get divisions along the traditional ethnic Hutu versus Tutsi type of channel. And so you're going to get more killings of this kind. A Tutsi kills a Hutu kills a Tutsi, until eventually the two communities are in open conflict.
Well, Mr. Onyema, thank you very much for your insight. As always, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Mr. Warwick Onyema speaking to us from London. He's an African news analyst. Still to come on Network Africa. Egypt signs a new anti-terror bill into law, and journalists might not have as much press freedom at their disposal. Details in just a moment.